The night I opened my husband's laptop and saw the wire transfers, I stopped breathing. 37 payments. Each one sent to the same offshore account, and the name on that account belonged to someone who sat across from me at dinner every single evening. My husband was not losing his mind. He was being robbed blind, and the person doing it had been kissing him on the cheek every morning for the past 2 years. But let me start from the beginning, because this story does not make sense unless you understand how a 63-year-old retired schoolteacher from Tennessee ended up married to one of the wealthiest men in Georgia. My name is Helen Porter. I grew up in a small brick house outside of Knoxville. My father drove trucks. My mother worked at a laundromat. We never had much, but we had each other. I became a teacher because I loved children and because it was steady work. I taught 4th grade for 31 years at the same elementary school. I retired at 60 with a small pension, a paid-off house, and my younger sister Ruth. Ruth was 56. She had always been the wild one in our family. She laughed louder than anyone in the room. She danced at every wedding. She made the best peach cobbler in 3 counties. But Ruth also had lupus. It hit her hard in her early 50s. The medications kept her stable for a while, but then her kidneys started failing. She needed a transplant. The waiting list was long. The bills were not. I sold my house. I moved into a small apartment. I picked up tutoring jobs on the side. But medical bills are a monster that eats faster than you can feed it. Ruth tried to stop me. She said, "Helen, Kanate, you have already given enough." I told her to hush. She was my baby sister. I would give everything. That was when I met Arthur Langford. I was working part-time at a catering company in Atlanta to make extra money. We were serving a fundraiser at the Langford estate, a sprawling property outside of Savannah with white columns and magnolia trees that looked like they belonged in a painting. I was arranging dessert trays when an older man in a grey suit walked into the kitchen. He looked lost. "Can I help you, sir?" I asked. He smiled. "I was looking for the chocolate cake. My doctor says I should not have any." "But what does he know?" I laughed. I cut him a slice. We talked for 10 minutes. He asked about my life. I told him about teaching, about Ruth, about Tennessee. He listened, like every word mattered. His name was Arthur Langford. He was 71 years old. He had built a real estate empire across the southeast. Hotels, shopping centers, retirement communities. His net worth was somewhere in the hundreds of millions. But that night in the kitchen, he was just a kind man who wanted chocolate cake. We kept in touch. He called me once a week, then twice. He said I was the first person in years who talked to him like a human being, and not a bank account. 3 months later, he told me something I was not expecting. He had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia. His doctors said the decline could be slow or fast. There was no way to predict it. He also told me his family situation. He had one son, Gregory, age 48. Gregory ran the day-to-day operations of the Langford business. He had a daughter-in-law, Monica, who managed the family's social calendar and spent money like it was oxygen. And he had a granddaughter, Elise, who was 22 and studying law. Arthur said Gregory and Monica visited him only when they needed signatures or approvals. Elise called sometimes, but she was busy with school. He said the house felt empty. He said he was afraid of what would happen when his mind started slipping. Then he asked me to marry him. I thought he was joking. He was not. "Helen, I need someone I trust beside me. Someone who is not waiting for me to forget my own name so they can take everything." I was honest with him. I told him about Ruth's transplant, about the money. He did not flinch. He said, "Your sister will have the best care available. I give you my word." I prayed for 3 days. I talked to Ruth. She said, "If he is a good man and you feel right about it, then go. But go with your eyes open." I married Arthur Langford in a small ceremony at a chapel in Savannah. No cameras, no press, just us, a pastor, and 2 witnesses. Ruth watched on a video call from her hospital bed. She cried. I cried. Arthur held my hand and said, "Thank you for choosing me." The first week at the Langford estate, I understood why Arthur felt alone. The house was enormous, 14 rooms, a staff of 6, but it was cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. Gregory arrived the day after the wedding. He was tall, clean-shaven, with eyes that calculated everything they looked at. He shook my hand and said, "Welcome to the family, Helen." His smile did not reach his eyes. Monica came in behind him. She was 45, blonde, always dressed like she was about to be photographed. She hugged me lightly and said, "How wonderful that father has company now." But her voice had a sharp edge, like a knife wrapped in silk. That first dinner was tense. Gregory asked me questions about my background. Where did you teach? How long? Do you have any experience managing finances? The questions felt less like curiosity and more like an interrogation. Arthur noticed. He put down his fork and said, "Gregory, Helen is my wife, not a job applicant." Gregory smiled tightly. "Of course, father. Just getting to know her." After dinner, I overheard Monica whispering to Gregory in the hallway. "A retired schoolteacher." "Really?" "He could not find someone from our circle." I pretended I did not hear it, but I filed it away. Over the next month, life settled into a routine. Arthur and I spent mornings walking the garden. He told me stories about building his company, about his late wife, about his regrets. Some days his memory was sharp. Other days he repeated himself or forgot small things. But he was still Arthur. Still kind, still present. Ruth's transplant was scheduled. Arthur kept his promise. The best hospital, the best surgeon, everything covered. I called Ruth every night. She sounded stronger already, just knowing the date was set. Then things started to shift. Arthur began having what the doctors called episodes. He would become confused suddenly, sometimes agitated. He once forgot where he was in the middle of lunch. The doctor increased his medication, but something about the timing bothered me. The episodes always seemed to happen after meals. Specifically, after meals prepared by the house cook, Margaret, under Monica's supervision. Monica had insisted on overseeing Arthur's diet. She said she had studied nutrition. She said she wanted to make sure he was eating properly for his condition. I noticed something else. Arthur's evening tea, which Monica personally brought to him every night, had a slightly bitter smell. I asked him about it once. He shrugged. Monica adds some herbal blend, says it helps with sleep. One evening, after Arthur had a particularly bad episode where he could not remember my name for 20 minutes, I waited until everyone was asleep. I went to the kitchen. I found the herbal blend Monica used for his tea. It was in a plain container with no label. I took a small amount and sealed it in a plastic bag. The next morning, I drove to a pharmacy I found 30 miles away. I did not want anyone local reporting back to the family. I asked the pharmacist if he could identify the blend. He looked at it under a light and frowned. "This contains several compounds I do not recognize immediately. You would need a lab analysis." I asked him where I could get one done quietly. He gave me the name of an independent testing lab in Atlanta. I did not tell anyone. Not Arthur. Not Ruth. Not the staff. Because I had learned something important from watching Gregory operate. In this family, information was power. And if I showed my hand too early, I would lose everything. The lab results took 5 days. 5 days of watching Monica pour that tea every evening. 5 days of watching Arthur's confusion deepen. 5 days of smiling at Gregory and Monica while my stomach churned. When the results came back, my hands shook so badly I could barely read the email. The blend contained a compound that, in sustained doses, could accelerate cognitive decline and cause symptoms mimicking advanced dementia. It was not a common poison. It was subtle, almost undetectable in standard blood work. Someone had done research. Someone had planned this carefully. I sat in my car in a parking lot and cried for 10 minutes. Then I dried my eyes and started thinking. I could not go to Arthur directly. If his confusion was partly chemical, I did not know how much he could process or remember. If he confronted Gregory or Monica, they would deny everything and destroy the evidence. I could not go to the police yet. I had a lab result from a tea blend, but no proof of who was administering it or why. Gregory was a respected businessman. Monica was connected socially. I was a retired schoolteacher who had married into money 6 weeks ago. I knew exactly how that story would sound. So I did what a teacher does. I gathered evidence, carefully, methodically, like grading papers, except the stakes were a man's life. First, I installed a small camera in the kitchen. I bought it at an electronics store 2 towns over, paid cash. I positioned it where it could see the counter where Monica prepared the tea. Within 3 days, I had clear footage of her adding powder from the unlabeled container into Arthur's cup. She looked around before doing it each time. She knew exactly what she was doing. Second, I started documenting Arthur's episodes: time, date, severity, and what he had eaten or drunk beforehand. The pattern was undeniable. Every episode followed Monica's tea by 2 to 4 hours. Third, I found the wire transfers. This was an accident, honestly. Arthur had asked me to find a document on his laptop one afternoon. His password was taped to the bottom of the keyboard, which told me how far his trust went. While searching for the document, I noticed a folder labeled Estate Planning. Inside were bank statements, showing 37 transfers over the past 14 months to an offshore account. Each transfer was between $15,000 and $40,000, small enough to avoid automatic flags. The account was registered to a shell company, but the authorized signatory was Gregory Langford. Over $1 million had been siphoned from Arthur's personal accounts. And because Arthur's memory was deteriorating, because someone was making sure it deteriorated, he never noticed. I copied everything onto a flash drive. I printed the lab results. I saved the camera footage to a secure cloud account. I kept all of it in a locked box in the trunk of my car, not inside the house. Now I had evidence. But I also had a problem. Gregory held Arthur's financial power of attorney. Monica controlled his daily care. If I moved too fast, they could claim Arthur was incompetent, lock me out, and accelerate whatever they were doing. I needed an ally. Someone with legal authority who was not under Gregory's control. I remembered Elise, Arthur's granddaughter, the one studying law. Arthur had mentioned that Elise was the only family member who called, just to ask how he was feeling. He said she reminded him of his late wife. I found Elise's number in Arthur's phone. I called her from a gas station payphone because by this point, I trusted nothing electronic inside that house. Elise answered on the third ring. "Mrs. Langford? Is Grandpa okay, Ide?" I told her everything. The tea, the lab results, the wire transfers, the camera footage. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, "I am driving down tonight." Elise arrived at midnight. She did not go to the main house. She came to the small guest house where I met her with the locked box. She reviewed everything for 2 hours. Her face grew harder with each document. "This is enough," she said. "But we need to do this right. If we confront them without legal protection, Dad will lawyer up and drag this out for years. Grandpa might not have years." She was right. Gregory had money, connections, and no conscience. We needed to be precise. Elise contacted a judge she had interned with during law school. She explained the situation. Within 48 hours, we had a court order for an independent medical evaluation of Arthur and a temporary freeze on all transfers from his accounts pending investigation. The morning the court officer arrived at the Langford estate, I was sitting at the breakfast table with Arthur, Gregory, and Monica. The doorbell rang. Margaret answered it. A man in a grey suit stepped in and asked for Gregory Langford. Gregory stood up, confused. "I am Gregory Langford." The officer handed him the papers. I watched Gregory's face as he read. First, confusion. Then recognition. Then something I had never seen on him before. Fear. "What is this?" Monica asked, leaning over his shoulder. She read 2 lines and her face went white. Arthur looked at me. "Helen, what is happening?" I took his hand. Something that should have happened a long time ago. Within an hour, the house was full of people. The independent doctor, a forensic accountant, 2 detectives from the county sheriff's office. Elise stood beside her grandfather the entire time, calm and steady. The doctor examined Arthur and ordered comprehensive blood work. The results, which came back the next day, confirmed what the lab had already found. Arthur had elevated levels of a compound consistent with the substance in the tea blend. His cognitive decline was at least partially, chemically induced. The forensic accountant traced every wire transfer. Gregory had been funneling money into his own accounts for over a year, using his power of attorney to authorize payments Arthur never knew about. Monica broke first. She always seemed like the stronger one, but when the detective sat her down in the living room and placed the camera footage on the table, she crumbled. "It was Gregory's idea," she said, her voice shaking. "He said Arthur was going to change the will. He said he was going to give most of it to charity and leave us with almost nothing. Gregory said if Arthur's mind went faster, we could control the estate before any changes were made." The detective asked. "And you agreed to poison your father-in-law?" Monica started crying. "I did not think of it as poison. Gregory said it was just something to speed up what was already happening. He said it was harmless. It was not harmless. The doctor confirmed that prolonged exposure could have caused permanent brain damage or organ failure. If it had continued another few months, Arthur might not have recovered at all. Gregory did not break. When the detectives confronted him, he sat perfectly still and said, "I want my lawyer." But his hands were trembling, and when they walked him out of the house in handcuffs, he looked at me with pure hatred. "You had no right," he said. I looked him straight in the eye. "Neither did you." Monica was charged with assault and administering a harmful substance. Gregory was charged with elder abuse, financial exploitation, fraud, and conspiracy. The judge denied bail for both of them given the severity and the premeditation. The weeks that followed were quiet in the best way. Arthur's new doctor adjusted his real medication and removed every trace of the contaminated supplements from the house. Slowly, day by day, Arthur came back to himself. His memory did not return completely. The dementia was real, just not as advanced as everyone had been led to believe. But he could hold conversations again. He remembered names. He laughed at his own jokes. He walked in the garden without getting lost. One morning, about 3 weeks after the arrests, Arthur sat across from me at breakfast and said, "Helen, I remember now. I remember you cutting me that chocolate cake." I smiled so hard my face hurt. He reached across the table and held my hand. They told me my mind was going. They told me I was fading, and I believed them because I could feel it happening. But it was not just the disease, was it? "No," I said softly. "It was not." He closed his eyes for a moment. "My own son." I squeezed his hand. "You did not fail him. He failed you." Arthur updated his will with a new attorney, one Elise had vetted thoroughly. He established the Langford Foundation for Elder Care, funding programs to protect vulnerable seniors from financial abuse and medical exploitation. He said if his story could prevent even one family from going through the same thing, it was worth telling. Ruth got her transplant. The surgery went well. 6 weeks later, she called me and said, "Helen, I walked to the mailbox today by myself. I cried right there in the kitchen, while Arthur patted my back and said, 'Your sister is tough, just like you.'" Elise graduated from law school that spring. She specialized in elder law. She told me once, "You showed me what courage looks like, Helen. It does not look like a courtroom. It looks like a woman with a flash drive in her purse and a locked box in her trunk." I laughed at that, but she was serious. Months later, I visited Monica at the facility where she was serving her sentence. She looked different, smaller. The sharp edges were gone. "Why did you come?" she asked. "Because I wanted to understand," I said. She looked at her hands. "I was afraid of being poor. I grew up with nothing. When I married Gregory, I thought I would never have to worry again. And when Arthur talked about giving it all away, I panicked." I nodded slowly. "Fear is a terrible advisor." She looked up at me. "Do you hate me?" I thought about it honestly. "No. I feel sorry for you. You had everything and you threw it away trying to keep it." She started crying. I did not comfort her. Some lessons need to be felt fully. Gregory never apologized. During his trial, he maintained that he was protecting the family's interests. The jury did not agree. He was sentenced to 12 years. Life at the Langford estate changed. Arthur hired new staff he trusted. Elise visited every weekend. I kept teaching, not at a school, but as a volunteer at the local library, helping adults learn to read. Arthur said it was the most useful thing anyone in his house had ever done. Some evenings, we sat on the back porch watching the sun set behind the magnolia trees. Arthur would look at me and say, "I thought I was hiring a companion. Turns out I married a detective." I would shake my head. "I am not a detective. I am just a teacher who pays attention." If you are listening right now, I want to ask you something. What would you do if you suspected someone you trusted was hurting someone you loved? Would you stay quiet, or would you risk everything to find the truth? Drop a comment and tell me, and make sure you subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Because the story I am going to tell you next involves a secret that was buried for 20 years, and the woman who dug it up was the last person anyone expected. Here is what I learned from all of this. Money does not make people evil, but it reveals who they already are. Gregory was not corrupted by wealth. He was exposed by it. And Monica was not destroyed by poverty. She was destroyed by the fear of returning to it. And me? I was a retired schoolteacher from Tennessee, who married a billionaire because her sister needed a kidney. I did not plan to uncover a conspiracy. I did not plan to save anyone's life. I just paid attention when things did not add up, and I refused to stay silent when the answers pointed somewhere dark. Because silence does not protect the people who need protecting. It protects the people who are doing the harm. And if there is one thing I know after 63 years on this earth, it is this: the quietest woman in the room is not always the weakest. Sometimes she is the one holding all the evidence, and she is just waiting for the right moment to use it. My name is Helen Porter Langford. I was a schoolteacher. I am a wife. I am a sister. And I am the woman who refused to let a good man disappear while his own family watched. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Silver's Revenge Story, because every week I bring you true stories about ordinary people who stood up when it mattered most. Because sometimes justice does not come from a courtroom. It comes from a woman who simply refused to look the other way.